guys, my name is Jessie Jennings and I'm a content creator here at Plaid, and welcome to Let's Paint Live, our monthly paint party where we teach you to paint a full painting in just about an hour. So tonight is one of my favorite months of the year for our Let's Paint Live because it is our Valentine's Day month. It's February, so we're doing a fun Valentine's Day painting tonight called I Love You With All of My Art. So this is a great painting for to do with your galentine or your Valentine, or to make in advance as a gift for someone you love. So it's a really fun one. It's a really easy one to customize, and I'm really excited to show you how I painted it tonight. Don't forget, we have Dylan Estes here in our studio today. So if you guys have comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the Facebook chat, and Dylan will read them to me or he'll answer them himself. So say hi, Dylan.
Hey guys, we're in the chat for you tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So make sure, if you're painting along, I'm so excited to help you guys along the way. But if you're watching and you're planning on painting later, make sure you still interact and ask all those questions so you can come back later and watch the replay and pause it and rewind it as you need and paint along at your own pace. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you know what supplies I'll be using tonight. So in front of me here, I have an 11 by 14 inch canvas, and you can see this is kind of a reused canvas. I don't like wasting canvases. We did a practice one on this and I want to make sure I reuse this one. I have, of course, as always, our folk art Let's Paint Live kit. So if you guys don't know, we have a kit where you can use it for every single Let's Paint Live painting. And it comes with 24 of our rich and creamy folk art colors. And like I said, it's a really great value because you can use it for every single painting we do each month. So I know Andy uses it a lot too for his paintings, Andy Jones, if you know him. But yeah, like I said, all of our paintings in our library and all of our paintings to come will be using this 24-piece Let's Paint Live kit. So if you guys are interested in that, it's great for a gift. If you know someone who loves to paint, or if you're planning on painting a lot with us, I highly recommend investing in that. So the specific colors we're going to be using tonight are wicker white, berry wine, cardinal red, baby pink, daffodil yellow, navy blue, Dutch aqua, and classic green. And then also in our Let's Paint Live kit is our 10-piece premium brush set. So I've only got a few from that pack tonight. I've got my 1-inch flat, or 3/4 inch flat is fine too. I have my number 12 flat, my number 10 flat, and then I have my number 5 round, or like a liner brush, something just smaller for getting some of these green details in here and for painting our letter if you choose to do so. I also have my palette paper here. So I love palette paper because it is less waste, in my opinion, than using paper plates or styrofoam plates. And it's really easy to mix paint on, and you can just kind of pull the sheet and go. So I recommend using this, but if you've got it, I like to use, like I'll put aluminum foil on a plate or something too, so I can keep using the same plate over and over again. Whatever you have for your paint is fine. I also have my paper towels, some water just to clean my brushes in, and then I have my hair dryer too. So like I said, this painting we'll be doing in just about an hour, so it'll be kind of a quick-ish pace. It won't be too bad. You can definitely paint along, but we will be using our hair dryer to dry in between coats and in between things so we can kind of keep moving along with our painting. And then the last thing I have here tonight are a couple of extra supplies that we don't always use for our paint nights. And that is just some scrap printer paper, a pencil, and some scissors. So these are sort of optional. We're going to be using these supplies to make the shape of our heart tonight to get a nice symmetrical heart. If you don't have them, don't stress. You're welcome to paint them by hand. If you don't have a pencil and all you have is the paper and scissors, that works too. But I will be using these tonight to show you how to make a perfect heart on your painting. All right, so do we have any questions about supplies?
No, we're getting the roll call. We've got some snowy weather, we've got some sunny weather, so I think we've got people from all over the country watching.
Awesome. I hear that it's snowing in Texas. I heard from my sister-in-law Skylar today, so that's kind of an interesting one. So good luck out there. Be safe if you're in Texas. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is a really easy step. We're going to be using our Dutch aqua, which is this really pretty light aqua color, just to paint our background. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a good bit of that on our palette, and we're going to start base coating our entire canvas. So I'll grab my biggest brush for this part, which is my 1-inch flat, and I'll start at the top and I'll just start covering the entire thing. So a little tip for base coating, a lot of people just kind of want to like glob a ton of paint on there and kind of get it over with and just smear it around until it's covered. Which, you know, there's something to that technique, but you really don't need to use as much paint as you think you do. Especially if you're using folk art acrylic paints, they are so rich and creamy. And they have such an opaque coverage that it takes very little paint to cover your canvas. So you just want just enough paint to cover. You don't want any more than that for a couple of reasons. One, it'll dry much faster so we can move along with our painting. And two, if you put way too much paint on anything really, but canvas especially at a time, it could crack. It doesn't want to dry that way. You need to do, even coats. If you need multiple, that's fine. But you don't want to just glob your paint on there because it won't dry evenly and that will cause cracking in your paint. So just enough paint to cover the surface, and that is all you need.
Jessie, what size canvas are we working on?
We are working on an 11 by 14 canvas tonight. A little different. We usually do square canvas, so I thought I'd mix it up a little this month. Last year we did, if you were here for our February paint night, kind of our Valentine's Day edition, we did 2 tiny little canvases to do with your sweetheart, which is really fun. So I like to mix it up for some of these more special paintings.
And Jessie is base coating her canvas with Dutch Aqua. So
Yep.
not regular aqua, Dutch Aqua.
Yep. So this is another color in our Let's Paint Live kit, which I mentioned earlier. Yeah, it's a really pretty color. It's one of my favorite ones in the kit, I'd say. And you can see here, I've only got 1 coat, and it's going to be 1 coat and done. We're not going to need a second coat, and that's because we are using our Folk Art acrylic paints, which have such awesome coverage. Just making sure I don't have to leave any white canvas behind. If I do, not a big deal, because we're going to be painting a lot of details and things on top of our base coat here, so not a big worry. But I'm of course going to do my best to get it to be nice and covered.
And again, Jessie's using Dutch Aqua.
Yep, Dutch Aqua, this really pretty, almost pastel-y aqua color, which is part of our Let's Paint Live kit. But you can also buy all these colors in stores or on plaidonline.com as well.
Yeah, if you don't know about this bundle, it's a great deal. You get all of the colors you need to paint almost 100 different paintings in our Let's Paint Live series, as well as 10 brushes that'll paint every single one of them.
Yep.
And be strong even through the 100th.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, it's a really great, especially if you guys have been painting with us for a long time and you are a returner for our Let's Paint Live series. I can recommend that enough because you truly will have every single paint you need for every single painting. And if you guys are folk art fans, you know that these paints will last you a very long time. You will not have to restock your stash for a long, long time. Okay, so my background's all painted, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush off. And then we're going to go ahead and pull out our hair dryers and dry it. So we'll be muted for a second while we dry our paintings. Okay. Nice and dry. It's nice and dry to the touch. And you can see here too, there might be a little bit showing. It kind of, the camera's picking up a lot of those details more than you can see it in real life. But I'm not going to worry about that because once we start adding all these stripes and we put this big heart on, and we start adding our flowers, you're not going to notice any tiny inconsistencies in the background. So we're going to go ahead and move along. Okay, so the next step in our painting are these really fun little sort of tone-on-tone stripes. They're just kind of another version of that Dutch aqua color. So I'm going to put a ton. If you still have Dutch Aqua on your palette, great. I have to put a little bit more because I ran out. And then I'm also going to put some of my wicker white. So any white's fine for this. Any white acrylic paint you have is good. It doesn't have to be wicker, but that's what's in our kit. And then I'm going to grab the second largest of my flat brushes, which is my number 12 flat. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of my Dutch Aqua and a little bit of my wicker white, about 1-to-1 ratio. And I'm going to mix that up. And you'll notice I'm not going to mix it completely because we have kind of this like painterly, sort of almost like chalky look to these stripes, which I like. It's not totally solid, so that's why we're not mixing it up entirely. We kind of want both colors sort of showing through. So I know this kind of intimidates a lot of people. You don't like painting straight lines, and I totally get it. But if you'll notice in our final painting, these are not meant to be perfect. If you really wanted to, you could pull out some painter's tape or stencil tape and tape it off and paint these lines, but we're just going to do our best to keep a steady hand and go across. If they're not perfect, that's kind of the look we're going for, like a loose tone-on-tone pattern in the background. So I'm just going to try my best to be steady. I'm going to start up at the top left and go right, because that's what I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you might want to start at the top right and go left, because that'll be more comfortable for you. So I'm just going to lean my hand on the canvas. That's why it's important that it's dry. And I'm going to just pull across. I'm going to try not to reload my brush, but if you need to touch up, no biggie. We're going to continue doing this about every inch or so, all the way down our canvas. You can see they're not going to be perfect, and that's kind of the look we're going for, that chalky, loose, painterly brush stroke to make these stripes.
And we had a question if we need to paint the sides. Now I think Jessie's going to put hers in a frame, so she didn't paint the sides.
Great question. So if you are planning on hanging this on the wall without a frame, you can absolutely paint the sides. I do like to put mine in frames, so I don't usually paint the sides, but also I kind of don't like painting the sides while I'm painting because I end up making a mess. So oftentimes I'll paint the entire painting and then I'll go back and do the sides just because I find that it's a little bit neater for me, but it's totally up to you. You are more than welcome to paint the sides as you go. And you can even continue these stripes onto the sides if you want, if that's easier. Great question though. You can see I'm not making these perfect. I'm just going as straight as I can, just to give us a little bit of interest in the background. This is not the focal point of the painting. The focal point is of course the heart, and then our secondary focal point are these pretty flowers. This is just the background, so it's not too bland. Just gives it a little bit of interest. And I'm not paying too much attention or taking too much time on these, because I don't want them to be perfect. That is the look I'm going for. Sort of a rustic farmhousey sort of vibe. Okay. Last stripe down here. Okay, and we're all done. Like I said, I did not spend too much time on that, and that was intentional because I didn't want them to be perfect. I didn't want to focus too much time on it because it is not a focal point of our painting. So I'm rinsing my brush off. And now we are going to set our painting aside. So we could, use the hairdryer, which we might end up doing anyway, but I'm going to show you how I made the template for this heart here to make it really symmetrical. And this should be dry by the time we're finished with that. So I'm just going to set this aside just for a second. And I'm going to pull in my just scrap paper and my scissors and pencil. And I'm going to show you one way to make a heart. So a lot of people, get intimidated by drawing hearts as well, which I totally get, because the most important thing about making a heart look, pretty and make it look neat is that it's symmetrical. A lot of times it doesn't really matter what the shape of the heart is. As long as both sides are the same, it will look neat. So I'll show you how I like to do it. I'm going to take my paper, and you kind of want to, hold it up to your canvas, especially if you're using a different size canvas tonight. If you've chosen something different, you want to make sure, you have a good size paper for what your canvas is. And I'm going to fold it in half. Oh, get rid of this one here. I only need the one sheet. I just had an extra. Fold it in half. And on the seam that we folded, so on the folded side, I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw half of a heart. So I'm not gonna, focus too much. Do it nice and loose, and that'll get you a nice smooth line. If you try, here's a little recommendation. If you try to, focus too hard and make it perfect, your line ends up wiggling if you don't have a perfectly steady hand. But if you just do a nice swooping motion, you're gonna get a much steadier line. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna start here. Don't forget, on the folded side,
Jesse's
nice,
bringing us back to some old school Valentine
exactly, some paper Valentines. A nice smooth line. So again, if you were to make your heart, taller and skinnier, or maybe wider, that's totally fine, because as long as it's symmetrical when you're done, it's going to look nice and neat. So now, just like Dylan said, old school Valentine style, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut through both sides, the entire folded piece of paper. And now we have a nice symmetrical heart to use as a template for our painting. Does that make sense? Do you think everybody got that, Dylan, or should I show them one more time?
Yeah, and you nailed your size there.
Thank you. I eyeballed it. But if that's why I had an extra piece of paper, if you kind of did it and you were like, oh, that wasn't as big as I wanted it, or that was too big, or whatever, go ahead and grab another sheet of paper and do it again. You saw how quick it was. It won't take you much time at all. But just a really easy way. Like I said, it doesn't matter what shape or style your heart ends up being. As long as it is symmetrical, it will end up looking nice and neat and intentional, which is always how we want our paintings to look. All right, so that was kind of quicker than I even thought it would be. Let's see if our painting is dry. Looks like maybe it could use a little bit of the hair dryer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to dry it a little bit really quick. Just make sure those stripes are nice and dry. That's all it needed. It's pretty dry now. Okay, so now we want to center our heart template on our canvas, and I'm going to pull my pencil back and make it as centered as you can. And to center things, here's a little tip. I don't look at the shape itself. I look at the space around the shape. So I can see here, I want to make sure that those two spaces look about the same, and then I know it's centered. Okay, so now, and I want to make sure that the space up here and the space down here look about the same. If I just look at my, heart, it could end up being like, kind of wonky, but if you look at the space around it, that's how you really know that it'll be in the center. So again, I want to make sure those two areas match and these two areas match. And then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to lightly trace my heart. Okay, so now we have a nice heart shape there on our painting. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to grab some of our cardinal red, and this is going to be the base color of our heart, that nice, bright, deep red, and we are going to put a little bit of this onto our palette. And then this is kind of an optional part, or I should say you can choose which brush you want. You can start with your bigger one, which I may do, then you can go back with a smaller one to get your edges, or vice versa. So let's actually grab our number 12 flat, which is the second largest of our flat brushes. And I'm just going to paint around the edges. Just going to go right up to those edges, just like a coloring book. And then we can go back in the center and fill in with our larger brush to save time. And to get that nice sharp line, I am using my brush. You don't want to put a ton of paint on it. If you put too much paint, you're not going to be able to control where the paint goes on your canvas. I'm just getting some of that water out. It's got too much water. And you will end up going over your line because you just can't control what the brush is doing because you have way too much paint. So just a little bit of paint on your bristles. And I'm going to go down on press down onto my canvas. And then I'm just going to butt the edge of those bristles right up against that line carefully. So just a little bit of paint at a time, not too much. And I'm going to use the edge of my bristles as a guide And you can get a really nice chiseled edge, which you can use for those corners. And the same thing on this side. I'm going to pull up because that's what's more comfortable for me.
And as you're doing that, Jesse is using Cardinal Red just right out of the bottle.
Yep.
And we are using the original Folk Art formula, but if you have some of our Folk Art multi-surface or glossy, we have a lot of different formulas. You can absolutely use those in place of these colors, but this is from our Let's Paint Live kit, which is the original formula.
Yeah. So again, I'm just using the very edge of the bristles of my brush, and I'm butting it right up against that line there. I'm never having too much paint on my brush, so we have nice control over the paint that is going onto our canvas. And again, I'm just using the smaller flat brush to go around all the edges, and then we'll use the thicker brush to kind of go in and do some of the hard labor and save us some time just filling in the middle. This will keep us from, you know, kind of going crazy with that big brush though and going over the lines.
We had a comment that this would be great with a little bit of glitter.
Oh, love that idea. It really honestly takes a lot of willpower for me not to include, you know, treasure gold, metallic, or glitter into every single one of my paintings. But yes, I think glitter would be adorable on this painting. Going right around the edge. And guys, if you do end up going over the line, do not stress. Either do the same thing on the other side so it looks intentional, or just dry it and go back with some Dutch Aqua and just touch it up. No biggie. Okay. So now we have all of our edges painted. Our nice outline. So I'm going to clean my brush off and then go back in with my larger brush to just fill in that space. Make sure I get all the water out. And I've got my 1 inch or 3/4 inch, whichever one. And we'll just do this nice and quick. And I just love the Cardinal Red. It's such a deep, rich, but like bright at the same time. It's just a beautiful red color. It's perfect for Valentine's Day. Okay, just going to smooth out some of that paint there, but you can see one and done. We are not going to need any more coats than that, and we have a perfectly filled in heart. Go ahead and rinse that off again. How's everybody doing out there, Dill?
I think everybody's really liking your painting.
Good, I'm glad.
We've got a lot of comments about snow. We're just getting rain here in Atlanta tonight,
yeah.
but we've got a lot of people with a foot of snow or more.
Oh, wow.
So it's always kind of fun.
I heard the groundhog did not see his shadow, so I guess that just goes to prove it. Got a little more winter coming our way. Okay, so now we're going to continue while this is wet because we're going to do some of this blending on the top of our heart to kind of create those highlights, I guess you could say. Just sort of that gradation that goes lighter to give it a little bit more detail. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 12 flat, and I'm going to put a little bit of baby pink on our palette. If you don't have baby pink, you can absolutely just use white because, of course, as we all know, pink is just red and white mixed together. So this is a little bit of a shortcut by just going straight to the pink, but if you just have white, you can blend that in instead with your red and you'll get this nice pink color anyway. So I'm going to pick up some of my baby pink. Again, you never want to have too much paint on your brush. As I'm about halfway up the bristles. And I'm going to start at the very tippy top of my heart, and I'm going to start dabbing. I'm doing a dabbing motion, and as you can see, since we're dabbing, we're getting some of that cardinal red to blend into our baby pink, and that is exactly what we want because we're going to start blending these two colors together. A little too far up there. And we want to be careful not to go over the edge as best we can, but of course we can always go back and touch up with our Dutch Aqua. So I'm kind of just going right around the edge just to get that clean edge first before I start dabbing and sort of blending down further. And we're just doing the very top. We're not going to go down very far. Of course, you could go down further if you wanted to, by all means, but we're just going to kind of do the tippy top edges of this heart. Okay, so I kind of got that top edge sort of painted out there. So now I'm just going to continue blending into my cardinal red. And to do that, I'm just doing this dabbing motion, as you can see. What we're doing with this dabbing motion is essentially all that red, cardinal red that is still wet underneath, is we're kind of just mixing it right on the canvas, just like we would have done over here on our palette if we were mixing the two colors together. It's the same concept, it's just happening on our canvas instead of on our palette. So I'm dabbing those together.
And if you guys are interested in our Let's Paint Live kit, we do have it linked in the description of this video.
Awesome.
You can also find it on platonline.com and a few questions about that.
Very cool, yeah. Make sure to check that out, guys. You get a lot of value in that kit. So if you need to, if you feel like it's getting a little dry and it's not blending well, you could pick up a little bit of your cardinal red and start kind of blending upwards. But we're just doing some very loose blending. This is kind of a good, it's nothing too advanced here, nothing too crazy, just kind of good practice for blending. This painting is a really good way to start. If this is a technique you're not used to or you're not familiar with, this is a really good sort of intro into some blending. We're just kind of dabbing until we get a nice smooth gradient of those two colors. Okay, keep doing that until you're happy. I'm going to put a little more cardinal red and blend it a little more smoothly at the bottom. If you can kind of wipe your brush off to get a little more of a fresh start. If you feel like you need more cardinal red and there's too much baby pink in your brush, or vice versa, you can just kind of wipe your brush off on a napkin to kind of refresh it and pick up the color you need more of. Okay, so it looks like it's not quite blended yet, but that's because it's wet. Once it dries, it's going to blend a little more into that red. And then, once you're a pro at blending, do the same thing to the other side. So I'm going to start my baby pink. I'm going to go right on the top edge. Right up to the tippy top, as close as I can. Kind of using that chiseled edge of our flat brush to my advantage to get that nice crisp edge. And then we're going to continue our dabbing motion just like we did on the left side, which if you're left-handed you may have started on the right side, which is totally fine.
So Jessie was working on her wet cardinal red heart, but if you do need to re-moisten it a little bit, you can just add a little bit more of that cardinal red to help blend.
Yeah, definitely.
And then if you do drop some of your paint on the edges, like on your background of your canvas, what do you think is the best way to
Yeah,
go
that's
about doing
totally
that?
fine. You saw a couple times I kind of went over the edge and then right away I took my finger and wiped it right back. So that's definitely an option. Like if you kind of just do like a little oopsie, you can probably just wipe it back up while it's still super duper wet. But if not, just let it dry or dry it with your hair dryer and then go back with your Dutch Aqua. Kind of one of the benefits of not mixing a color for your background is that you can always go back with it right out of the bottle and just touch up, and it's really easy to do without having to remix an exact color.
But it's good to let that dry.
Yes, you definitely want to
you
dry,
don't
because
wanna smear
otherwise, right, you're going to mix your red or pink and Dutch Aqua together and you're going to get a beige color, which is not really what we're going for. Definitely want it to dry first. Unless you get it, like I said, right away, really quick, you might be able to just wipe it up, but otherwise let it dry.
And for everyone interested, this will be available as soon as we're done with the live stream. The video file will be available in our video section on our Plaid Crafts Facebook page. So you can always go back, and in fact, we usually encourage you to just watch for entertainment right now and pick up the tips and then go back and intently watch to paint later after the broadcast so that you can kind of pause the video and work at your own pace.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty guys, so you can see here, just really subtle, little pretty blending at the top. I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to go ahead and rinse my brush off. And while our pretty heart is drying, we are going to go ahead and get started on some of these pretty roses for our Valentine's Day painting. So I'm just making sure I get all the water out of my brush before I continue. Get myself a fresh paper towel. All right. So let me see if I can scooch a little so you can see the other end of my painting. Shift around a little bit, just so you can see the flowers on both corners, just to kind of see where my placement is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my number 12 flat. This is the one that we were using to blend our hearts. And we're going to start by painting our big red roses. So to do our roses tonight, the kind of the technique we're going to be using is starting with our darkest color. That is going to be our base color, and then moving to our most medium color to give it some highlights, and then maybe even adding an even lighter color on top to give it even further highlights. So the darkest color for these pretty red roses is our berry wine. So I'm going to grab some of my berry wine, which is usually the title says, it's this pretty like maroon or burgundy color. I'm going to put a little bit of that onto my palette. And it's the perfect color to accent and be sort of a darker version of our cardinal red. Okay, so I've got my number 12 flat, like I said. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my berry wine. Just like I mentioned a couple of times, you don't want too much paint. Just kind of go halfway up the bristles. And we're going to start by making C shapes with our brush. So I'll kind of show you, here I'll grab my heart template to do some practices to show you guys. Instead of, kind of pulling down and using that flat edge, or I should say the wide edge to get big strokes like we've been doing so far in our painting for base coating and blending and creating stripes, we're going to use the chiseled edge going kind of long ways, if that makes sense. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to, instead of pulling down like this, which is how a lot of people would expect to use a flat brush, I'm going to go this way instead to get some thinner lines. But we're going to do some C shapes to create those petals. So I'm going to hold my brush up, push down, and then pull up again. And we're going to get these C shapes here. I'm going to hold my brush upright, push down, pull up again. Hold it upright, push down, pull up again. Now you can see how we're going to start to create that base rose shape. And we're going to continue doing this, and these are going to kind of be our petals. That's what these brush strokes are going to end up being. So hold it upright, push down, pull up. Upright, push down, pull up. And continue doing this until you have a nice full rose shape. So this is a technique we'll be using for all of these flowers here tonight. So feel free to continue practicing that. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start putting these onto my canvas. So we're going to start with a nice big red rose right up here, just like our original painting. So just like I said, I'm going to hold my brush upright, push down, press up. I'm going to kind of reload it each time, just to make sure I have enough paint. Hold my brush upright, push down, press up. Upright, push down, press up. And continue doing this so we get a nice full rose. I'm going to go on the inside too. If they overlap, that's great because we want it to be nice. We don't want to see any of that blue coming through. And we're going to go over with some lighter colors too to kind of lighten it up. So don't worry if it ends up being like kind of one big just berry wine shape, that is okay. Don't worry if you kind of end up covering more canvas than you expected to. That is all right. Okay, I'm going to do probably one more little petal here. Maybe two. Okay, so that's our rose shape. And now I'm going to do the same thing again in the bottom left for another red rose. Hold it upright, push down, pull up. And if you feel like you're getting a little too much paint in your brush, if it's starting to get a little moppy, you don't want that. Like I said, the more paint that is in your brush, the less control you have over the way the paint goes onto your canvas. So that's why I kind of wiped it off and I got rid of some of that excess paint so I can reload my brush to be the way I want it and continue with my brush strokes. Upright, push down, pull up. And then continuing into the center. You can see it kind of got a little wonky, so I'm just going to add some here and there to make it a little more round. Okay. All right, so while these are still wet, we're going to continue working on them. So I'm going to just wipe my brush off. I'm not rinsing it yet. I'm just wiping it on a dry paper towel. And now we're going to go to our middle color, which is going to be our cardinal red, the one we're using for our heart. So I haven't cleaned my brush off. I just wiped it off in the paper towel. I'm going to pick up some cardinal red, and I'm going to do the same thing over my brush strokes, but kind of towards the center, focusing on the center of our flower and letting that edge be the darkest color, our berry wine. So the same thing right over it. If it mixes together, that is great. We want it to be a little bit blended. So I'm going to start sort of towards the center. I'm not going to go right up to the edge. Hold it upright, push down, pull up, and this will lighten that rose up and give it lots of different values, make it look a little bit more realistic. It's the same thing we did before, but focusing towards the center with our cardinal red. And same thing for our other rose. And I'm kind of focusing, you can see too, on covering up some of that Dutch aqua so we don't see it shining through. We don't really want to see the background. Okay. And now, so if you think about a rose, of course you have all of the petals coming up from the center, and then what is in the very center of the rose? It's kind of this deep dark well that goes to the center. There's nothing really, like a lot of flowers will have something coming out, like what are those called again, Dylan? The things coming out?
Stamen.
Stamen, thank you. Dylan has reminded me of that before, like the stamen coming out. But on a rose, it kind of goes down. There's a well in the middle where the flower, or where the petals are sort of wrapped around it. So if something's further away from us, which this well of the flower would be, we want it to be darker, and that will give us a sense that it's further away. So to do that, we want to get a color that's even darker than our berry wine. And if you'll notice, we do not have a color of red anyway that's darker than our berry wine in our supply list tonight. So instead of that, we are going to use navy blue to darken up our berry wine color. So I'm going to put a little bit of navy blue on my palette. Oops, this is a brand new bottle, it's sealed.
Now, we did have a question if the rose had a pattern. Jessie is not using a pattern.
Nope.
Just those brush strokes, those comma brush strokes,
Yeah.
which is a really, you can look up different folk art styles of roses. Andy Jones teaches one. Priscilla Hauser is very famous for her rose. That's her cottage rose, I think it's called.
Yep.
That's just like that. So you can definitely find more in-depth techniques if you're wondering if you want to dive into that.
I will not claim to ever have better roses than Priscilla Hauser.
Yeah.
She is the queen of painting roses. This is a much more simplified version of Priscilla Hauser's rose, but yes, like Dylan said, she is the queen of painting roses, so feel free to check out her tutorial too if you want to learn a little bit more about it. Okay, so I've got my navy blue on my palette here, and keep in mind we're still kind of working quickly while our paints on our roses are still wet. So I picked up some navy blue, and then I'm going to kind of even wipe it off. And what do you get when you mix red and blue together? Purple, or violet, of course. So we're going to get this, since our berry wine is getting sort of to the violet area, it's like getting to be like a cool dark red, this is going to take it even further and make it look even darker. So a little bit of navy blue, and we're just going to dab that in the center of our rose. It's going to really give it some depth. And I'm just taking a little bit of paint and I'm dabbing it gently into the center. We're not really focusing on any exact shapes. It's not going to be any sort of, photorealistic rose by any means. It just gives you the impression of a pretty soft red rose.
We did have a question, is it okay to mix matte and multi-surface paints? And that's totally fine.
Yeah, absolutely. You can totally mix them together. The only thing to keep in mind when you're using both is that our folk art matte, of course, it has a matte sheen when you're done, while our multi-surface has a satin sheen. So that doesn't bother me. I use them together all the time, but it's just something to keep in mind. All right, guys. So now our red roses are done. We're going to leave them. We're going to keep them super simple. Then we're going to move on to our pink roses. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. Oh, I left my brush in the water. It's a no-no. I'm going to rinse my brush out. And then we're going to put some of our baby pink on our palette. So I've actually got some on here, so I won't add any more. But if you need more baby pink, go ahead and add that now. I'm going to pick up the third largest, or I guess really our smallest of the flat brushes we have here tonight, which is my number 10 flat. And we're going to do the same thing we did with our berry wine color, but with our baby pink. So I'm going to do smaller flowers. So my red roses are kind of the biggest, and I'll do a couple of smaller pink roses around the sides. So same thing. Those C strokes or comma strokes that Dylan mentioned, we're going to do the same thing over again, but tinier. So I'm doing little strokes all around to make that flower shape. Try to get out of the shadow. So we're upright, press down, pull up. And you can make these as big or as small as you want. Maybe I'll make mine a little bit bigger. But I do want them to be smaller than my red rose. Okay, and then I'll do a little one, maybe going off the edge up here too. All right, and then down here I'll do one up here and one here. Upright, push down, pull up. You can have them overlapping too, that would be pretty. Another one here. And I'll do another one kind of poking off the bottom here. Okay. And then while I have this out, you can see here I kind of have these little pink buds too. We're going to go ahead and we're going to paint those. So just with my baby pink, I'm just going to do 3 little, this is not the technical term, but I like to call them smooshes. I'm just going to smush my brush down to get that very sort of vague and soft shape right there. So I'll show you what I mean by a smush. I'm going to put my brush down, then I'm going to smush, smush, smush. And that's going to give us our 3 little bud shapes. And I'll do a few up here too. And we'll go back later with some green details to make it look more like little flowers. All right, so that is our baby pink portion. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go over those with a little bit of white. So the white is going to be our lighter color. Just like when we did our red roses, we started with the berry wine and then went over them with our cardinal red. We're starting with our baby pink and we're going to lighten them further with some white. So I didn't rinse my brush, I just wiped it off. I'm going to pick up some white and I'm going to go over them just like we did with our larger roses, kind of trying to fill in where that Dutch aqua is showing through, and if the pink is blending into it, even better. We want that to happen because that'll make it look more uniform. That's why we're doing it while our pink is still wet. And again, I'm not going all the way to the outside edges if we remember from our larger roses. I'm kind of focusing more towards the center and letting the outside edges be the darkest color of that flower, which is our baby pink. Okay. And if you feel like, I kind of feel like my baby pink dried a little faster than I wanted to, and that white is a little bit stark against it. So I may even go back and pick up a little bit of baby pink and kind of just blend those in a little more. Because I think they're looking maybe a little too white, if that makes sense. Because my pink dried a little faster than I wanted it to. So I'm kind of just going back with some baby pink and making those, going over that white to make it look a little more subtle and a little more blended, like it belongs. Okay, so now it looks a little more blended. I like that better. Okay, and then just like we did for our larger flowers, remember we went back and added the navy to give you that deep center. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it with our berry wine. So I'm going to pick up just the tiniest bit of berry wine. You can see here there's hardly any on my brush, and then I'm even going to wipe some off. And I'm going to just dab, 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 dab in the center of each of those flowers to give it some depth. And wipe off a little more even. And I got a little dark, so you can even go back with some pink if you want and blend that in if it feels too dark. I had a little more berry wine on there than I thought I did. So I'm just going to blend it in a little more. So we have that nice little dark spot in the center to kind of just give you some depth so you can really tell that there's, you know, that well in the center of your petals. And now I'm going to rinse my brush off. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move on to our greenery. So this is kind of my favorite part whenever I am painting flowers for some reason, whenever I'm painting a bouquet, because this is the part where it really comes together and you can start to fill in and make it look really full. So You can kind of be creative with the placement of your greenery. You can use some of these open spaces and negative spaces to start filling in those gaps and making it look really lush. So that's what we're going to do now. So to start, we're going to pick up some of our classic green and put that onto our palette. And I'm going to grab my smallest brush tonight, which I've got my number 5 round. And I'm going to start by painting in where I want some larger leaves. So we'll keep it simple. So just a very standard leaf shape like this one here, kind of like a long football. I'm going to start here by filling in this. And I do 2 here because my gap's a little bigger than it was in my original painting. So we'll do just doing the outline. Very classic leaf shape, nothing fancy. Excuse me. And I'll do another one of those maybe over here. I'm leaving some space for stems for my little buds that we painted here. Do another classic leaf shape up here. I can have one coming out this way. I like to have things going off the canvas too to make it look very full. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some of these smaller leaf shapes. And then after that, we'll go back and start adding some more color to these and giving them a little bit of dimension. But I'm just going to really lay out where all of the greenery is. Well, I've just got this classic green. So first, I'm going to add the details we talked about to our little buds here. To do that, just like we created our buds with that nice smooshing technique, which I know is not really what it's called, but it's what I call it. We're going to do the same thing, but to add a little bit of green to the bottom of these buds to make them look like little flower buds. So I'm going to go one on either side of the base. So of course the base would be coming from this way because this is kind of where our bouquet is. So they're going to be on this side, sort of facing that way. So I'm going to do a little green there, and a little green there. Really simple. So really simple. Just make it look like it's, part of the greenery. And the same thing here. So we're going to have it facing our bouquet as if it's growing from it. Just little green spots there. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add these fun little, green sprigs coming out of our bouquet. And this is another great way to fill in florals. If you're painting a bouquet or a garden or just, something like this, like a wreath or something like that. It's a really fun little piece of greenery to add to just keep things full. So I'm going to have this one kind of coming out this way. I'm just doing the stems first so I can kind of place. I'll have another one coming out this way. And I'm just using the very tip of my round brush. You can see I'm not pressing down very hard. We'll do one coming this way, kind of matching our original design. Then another one coming out that way. And to create these little leaves, again, we're keeping it super simple. We're just going to go up the side of our little stem here. So I'll show you. And I'm going to touch the stem and then press down to get that little leaf shape. Touch the stem and press down. And I'm going to continue doing that all the way up the stem until it's full with little leaves. I'm going to match it on the other side. This cute little sprig, it's really simple. Maybe I'll add a little one down here too. And the same thing for all of the sprig, all the little stems that we have just placed. Do one at the top there. And then up here. This time we're pulling down instead of pulling up because of course we're going in the other direction. I'm kind of going around my little buds here. And then my last one over here. Okay, I have cute little sprigs now. So the next part for our leaf shapes is we're going to just use the same classic green to fill in those just very classic leaf shapes we painted in the beginning. So I'm just going to fill it in And then we'll go back and add some darks and lights to make it look slightly more dimensional. But right now I'm just going to do a flat coat of that classic green. Okay. Okay, so now I'm not going to rinse my brush off just yet. I just wiped it on my paper towel a little. We are going to add some darks and lights to our leaves and greenery. So kind of similar to how we chose our colors for our roses, we want to think of a lighter version of our green and a darker version of our green. And you may be able to guess, based on our color palette here, the two colors it takes to make green are yellow and blue. So those are the colors we'll be using for our dark and our light. So we have this nice light yellow and this nice dark blue to use. So I'm going to put a little bit of each of those on my palette. It doesn't take much. Oh, and I've got some navy blue, so I won't put any more. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up some of my navy blue, just a tiny bit, and I'm going to sort of work it into the brush here on my palette so it's not quite so stark. And then I'm going to make some little details on the underside of each of my greenery. So if you guys have painted with me before, when we're doing these 1 hour quick paintings, I use a very loose interpretation of light source. So generally, I just kind of assume my light source is coming from above. So the sun is up there, the lamp is up there, wherever this little scene is placed, our light is coming from above. So I will place all of my shadows, if you will, on the underside of my shapes, and I will place all of my highlights on the top side of my shapes. So right now we're doing our shadows, and so we're going to go underneath each of our shapes to give it a little bit of just depth, what makes it look like it's a little bit more dimensional. So here I'm going to go from below . You can even do some on your smaller sprigs that you made. Just keep in mind you always want to be underneath. You can see I'm being very loose with it. But if you're confused about kind of, where to put highlights and shadows, that's just a really sort of easy and simplified way to do it. Just put the shadows in the bottom and put the highlights on the top. And now you can even pick up some green and sort of like blend those in a little more if you feel like they're a little too dark. Just sort of swoosh back over them to give you that nice blend. Okay, great. So now I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm not rinsing it yet, just wiping it. And I'm going to do the same thing with some daffodil yellow. Oops, I got some red. Some daffodil yellow on the tops of each of our leaves. I don't really see them up there. And we can go on our little ones here too. Get a little highlight here and there. And then we can go back with our green to sort of blend in to where it may be a little bit too bright. You can see we have a little bit of dimension there. That just gives you some more detail to your painting. It makes it look a little less flat. All right, guys, so that is it for our florals. We are coming up on the very last step of our painting, which is personalizing it. So as you can see here, I just hand lettered a J here because my name starts with a J and my last name and my husband's name, so it just felt like the obvious choice here. But you can put your family's last name or your Valentine's, initial, or you can even put a picture there. You could grab some of Mod Podge, America's favorite decoupage medium, and Mod Podge a photo there. That would be really pretty. It is totally up to you. If you have some mailbox stencils, this is the perfect size for a paper mailbox stencil to put an initial there as well. But I am going to go ahead and just draw my J, just show you the way I did it. Unfortunately, can't show you how I would draw every single initial tonight, which I wish I could, but I'm going to do the J here tonight. And I will give you a little tip on if you're a little bit nervous about hand lettering, which I totally get, because that's something that is very trendy, but really does take a lot of practice. I recommend going online and either going into like Word or something and finding a script that you like, or just going on Google and Googling the letter you choose, and then taking some transfer paper and transferring that printout right onto your heart here, and just tracing it that way. It's a really simple way to personalize something and get a font and a script that you love. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how I did mine. So I've got my white here, my wicker white. I'm going to put a little water in it just to help it flow a little bit, just to kind of get that base letter down. And then I'm going to probably go back and fill it a little more because I'm kind of watering it down right now. So again, I wish I could show you how I would do every letter. I don't know the perfect way for sure, but I will show you how I did my J and give you a little bit of tips that will hopefully help you to paint your initial that you choose. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go up. And something important, this is a really, really important tip for if you're doing that sort of hand lettering. Like I said, hand lettering has been very trendy for the past 5 years or so. And as far as I know, the biggest tip is always that when you go up with your stroke, it's thin, and when you go down with your stroke, it's thick. So for example, this J, going up, thin, down, thick, back up, thin. And that goes for every letter, whether it's A, B, C, D, any letter of the alphabet. I almost said any letter of the rainbow. I got paint on the brain. Any letter of the alphabet, it is always going to be the same. If you're going up with your line, it's going to be thin, and if you're going down with your line, it's going to be thick. So that will help you too. And that, like I said, is universal for all of the letters. So I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to go up, so I'm not going to put any pressure on my brush. I'm going to keep it very thin. Pick up a little more paint, and now I'm going to go down, touch that up a little. So I'm going to thicken it by pressing down. And then once I start going up again, I'm going to make it thin once more. And that is how I painted my J. So you can go back and you can kind of tweak it and clean it up a little if you want to. And kind of started drying out as I went because I used paint on my palette that was probably a little too dry for that. So use fresh paint, but you can always go back and touch it up. And like I said, feel free to, kind of go the easy way and print out a letter and just use some transfer paper, or if you don't have transfer paper, an easier way is to grab some scrap paper and take a piece of chalk and color over it and then flip that down and transfer it that way. It's a really easy way to make your own transfer paper, especially if you don't need much of it. But I highly recommend going online and going on Word or PowerPoint or whatever programs you have on your computer and getting a letter and printing it out so you have just the script that you want. So do you have any questions, Dylan?
No, I think we have a question about the next painting,
Ooh.
which is always good.
Awesome, guys. I'm so glad that you joined me tonight. This is, like I said, one of my favorite months of the year for Let's Paint Live because I love getting to do like the special paintings for December when we do ornaments, and for February when we do a fun Valentine's Day painting. And I do have next month's to show you, so of course we're really excited to get into our spring content for Let's Paint Live. So next month we have a debut painter, so you guys probably know her. Emma Panuski is one of our content creators here, and she is always on our Facebook page doing lives and showing you how to Mod Podge and use apple barrel and do all kinds of different crafts here at Plaid, but she surprisingly has never painted on our Let's Paint Live segment. So she's really excited to make her Let's Paint Live debut, and she'll be painting this beautiful floral vase next month. So make sure to join us. We are here every single month. It's the first Thursday of the month at 7:30 p.m. And like I said, next month is a really fun one because Emma Panuski will make her Let's Paint Live debut, and we'll see you there. Bye, guys.